Hey guys, it's Nina, and today I'm going to be going through my 2017 Bookish year in review, etc. video. I don't really know what I'm calling this yet. So just as a little roadmap for this video, I'm going to be going through my Goodreads reading statistics as well as some other reading statistics from 2017, then my top 7 books of this year, and then my top 3 comics of this year. Because let's be real, comics and books need to be in separate categories. So without further ado, let's get started with some reading statistics. So this year I set my Goodreads reading challenge at 30 books, and I passed that reading a total of 37 books, which I'm really happy with, and that of course includes comics in there, so it's actually more like 27 books, but whatever, it's still impressive, for me at least. And according to Goodreads, I read 12,500 pages, which is also pretty good. I think last year my total was around 13,500 or something, which, like, whatever. I had more time last year, so that's understandable. You don't need to increase every single year because that would be insane. Then the shortest book that I read this year was Hawkeye, All New Hawkeye by Jeff Lemire, and this was 112 pages. And the longest book that I read this year was A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas, which is, 699 pages. Which it doesn't look like it, but it certainly feels like it because this book is heavy. And then the average length of the books that I read was 347 pages. Then the most popular book that I read this year, which is the book that has the most ratings on Goodreads, was of course Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, because, you know, it's the first Harry Potter book, and this almost 6 million people have read. You know, understandably. And then the least popular book that I read this year was Alethea by Meagan, which I think 200 and something people read. So still working its way up there. Then the most popularly rated book that I read this year that's on Goodreads is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which has a 4.59 rating, which is pretty much unheard of, and it totally deserves it, but more on that later. And my personal average rating was a 4.4 according to Goodreads, but then this segues into something else because I actually kept my own kind of personal records for statistics for the books that I read this year in 2017, and for my personal records I kept track of half stars, whereas Goodreads doesn't, so my actual average rating was more of a 4.22. So when I say I kept my own records, basically a booktuber who I am completely blanking on the name of created this giant massive spreadsheet template thing to keep track of all the books that you read in 2017 or whatever year. It's a template, you can use it however you want, but one of my New Year's resolutions that I actually kept up with was using this template for 2017. So I kept track of all the books that I read, who the publisher was, star rating, where I got them, if I paid for them, how much I paid for them, etc, etc. It's this really in-depth spreadsheet. I will leave a template for it down below so that you guys can all use it, and I will also leave the creator credits, etc, because I'm completely blanking on whose it was, but I did not create this because I'm good with Google Docs, but I'm not quite that good. So then I have a few other fun statistics from that document that I thought would be fun to share. The first is where I got the books that I was reading this year. So according to the spreadsheet, about 48% of the books that I read this year I acquired and bought with my own money brand new. And then the second biggest category is books that I got from the library, which was actually 30% of the books that I read this year, which makes me really happy. My goal for 2018 is to make that even higher, but that's actually not that bad. So hopefully that'll be even better next year. And then another interesting one for me was what genres I was reading, because it pretty much reflected exactly what I thought it would. Basically, this is the pie chart of the different genres that I read. The biggest one on here is fantasy at 35%, but the second biggest one is superheroes, or basically comic books, at 29%. But then I have another graph that's slightly different, which is the genre that I read by page count, and in this, fantasy is way bigger because of course I did read a lot of things that were superheroes, but they were all graphic novels and 150 pages each. So fantasy is definitely dominating in this one. So I just thought that was really fascinating. That's really it for the statistics, and again, that template will be down below if you're interested in keeping up with this for 2018, because I know I will be doing this again because I just find all this stuff fascinating. So next up is the thing that you're all really here for, and that is my top 7 books of 2017. So before I get started, I do have one honorable mention because this book was a reread, but it absolutely deserves a place on this list, and that is of course Illuminae by Amie Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This book I reread this year, but I didn't reread it, I listened to it as an audiobook, and let me say the audiobook is a completely new experience, just entirely different from reading the book as a physical book. So I couldn't not mention it because it was so amazing, and definitely my favorite audiobook that I listened to this year by far. Then coming in at number 7 on my top 7 list, we have Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which is the third book in the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. This book I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars, really enjoyed it, and this is almost my favorite one in the series. I would say it was my favorite one in the series of 2017 because I'm almost done with the 4th one right now, but it counts towards 2018 and like, oh my god, it was so good. But this is basically here to represent the first 3 books in the Harry Potter series that I read this year because I did really enjoy them and I can't wait to read more of them in 2018. Next up, we have Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. This book was really great. It took me by surprise. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was just a really cutesy romance. I really don't know how else to describe it except that it was cute, and I'm really excited for the movie in 2018. There's so many of these things that I'm looking forward to next year. Then coming in at number 5 is actually a book that I was sent in exchange for an honest review, which is actually the first review copy of a book that I've ever gotten, so that was cool that that happened this year. And that is Alethea by Meagan Tennant, and Meagan Tennant is actually a booktuber. I will leave her channel down below if you want to check her out because she's really awesome. And this book, I had kind of low expectations going into it because it is a dystopian, and dystopians these days haven't been very good, but I can say this book was amazing. Like, 5 out of 5 stars, I loved it. Basically, this dystopian society came about because there was this virus that was going around that was taking everyone's memories, so our main character was cured of that virus, but in exchange for being cured, she's part of this like lower class that's doing all the manual labor for this upper class. You know, your typical dystopian stuff. But this book was so good. There was a bi-main character, which I absolutely loved, and just overall the diversity and just, it was so good. So if you're looking for a new dystopian that isn't like full of all the tropes, totally recommend this one because it was great. Next up on my list, I have Tower of Dawn by Sarah J Maas, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars, but I absolutely love this. This book kind of made me fall back in love with the Throne of Glass series. I was not the biggest fan of Empire of Storms, and I think part of the reason for that was that there were so many characters and so much going on that I just kind of missed the old Throne of Glass stories where we were just following Selena and maybe Chaol and Dorian. But this one kind of reminded me of that. We're just following Chaol and Nezerin, and it's just such a more boiled down character driven story, and I just loved it. It was so good. And if you're wondering, A Court of Wings and Ruin did not make my list. It was in my top like 17 of 2017, but not my top 7. This one was definitely better in my opinion. Coming in at number 3, we have Magnus Chase and the Ship of the Dead by Rick Riordan. This is the second book in the Magnus Chase series, and if you're wondering, no, I have not read the third one yet, even though this is my third favorite most book of the year. I just really enjoyed this book. I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars if I didn't already mention that. I think this is honestly one of Rick Riordan's best series, if not his best. I hesitate to say that because I'm so obsessed with the Percy Jackson series, but I am just in love with the series. It was an amazing middle book in a series, and I can't wait to read the last one. I need to get on that. And then number 2, best book of the year, is gonna go to Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This book I kind of went into with mixed expectations because The Lunar Chronicles is one of my favorite series of all time, so I love Marissa Meyer, but her last book last year was Heartless, and I had like, it was okay, like it was good, but I didn't love it. So I was kind of managing my expectations going into this, but this, I loved it. Marissa Meyer and superheroes. What more do you need to know or to love? It was just so well executed. I loved the writing style. I just loved the characters. The whole thing was amazing. And I can't even like fully put my finger on what it was, but I think it was just that it was Marissa Meyer and her excellent storytelling and just feeling like I was coming home to her writing almost. Like, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but it was amazing. 5 out of 5 stars. Second best book of the year, which is pretty darn good. And then my number 1 best book of the year is one that I read pretty early on this year, but just nothing has passed it, and that is of course The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This book was amazing. It made me laugh, it made me cry, and let me tell you, I never cry when reading books, but this book made me cry twice. But it was also like so heart-wrenching, but also so funny and had its light moments and really showed the way to get through loss, but also come out okay and be light about it sometimes, and I just loved it. I have a full spoiler-free review of this, which I will leave up in the cards and down below because you should check it out if you want to know more of my thoughts, but it was so good. I can't even, like, if you only read one book next year, if you only read one book in the next upcoming months, I don't care, read this one because It's so important, has such important themes, and it's also just all around a really good book. Like, it's not one of those books you read just because it's important, you read because it's a genuinely good story and you learn things. So those were my favorite books of the year, and now I'm gonna go through my top 3 comics, because these are all the comics that I gave 5 stars this year. Coming in at number 3, I have Hawkeye, All New Hawkeye by Jeff Lemire. This is kind of volume 5 in the Hawkeye series by Matt Fraction, but it now transitions into a new author and is kind of a segue book between that first half of the series and now a new half, and I just loved it. The art style was really beautiful. You can definitely tell that it's a filler book in that the plot isn't the most amazing thing, but it's really good and it's all about character development, which I am personally a sucker for. It had a lot of flashbacks into Clint Barton's past, and that was completely woven in with the main storyline that was happening with him and Kate, and it was amazing. I loved it, and I cannot wait to continue with this series or this new series, or I don't know how that works, but yeah, I'm excited. Then coming in at number 2, I have the first volume of a comic book series, and that is Thor Volume 1, The Goddess of Thunder. This is the first installation in a 2-part series where basically the normal Thor that we all know and love has suddenly become unworthy of wielding Mjolnir, which is his hammer, so he can't do it anymore. So this woman, who no one knows who she is, she walks up and picks up the hammer and becomes Thor. And it's kind of following her story and people trying to figure out who she is, and it's really good. I absolutely love this first volume. The second one was okay, but you have to read both of them in order to know what's going on. And it's only a 2-volume series, and then it kind of goes off into another storyline. But I absolutely loved it. Can't wait to read more in that other series that actually follows the new Thor. And then finally, my favorite comic book of this year was Ms. Marvel Volume 3, Crushed. I loved this volume. I think it was finally the story that Ms. Marvel deserved, because I liked her first volume. It was a good setup, but it wasn't amazing. And then her second one kind of sucked. It was not my favorite, but this one blew me out of the water. I loved the character development. I loved the plot. It was just so good. So that is it for my kind of 2017 bookish year in review video. Let me know down below if you read any of these books or what your favorite books of 2017 were, and I will see you guys later with another video soon. Bye! Even though this was my third most favorite book too, with kind of mixed expectations.